Hello, everyone. Welcome on Unofficial podcast. I'm happy to see you once again. And today in the morning, just before our podcast, I was reading different news and all the headlines, all the hashtags are about like NFTs, Metaverse, like what's next in 2020. So all these hype words. And I was thinking that maybe we should actually have this podcast and talk about all of the things. So I'm your host, Oleg Sapishchuk.
And I'm your host, Peter Schmalfeldt. And Oleg, I am excited about today's talk. I know you and I spent a long time on Slack talking about this stuff and all the different content that's out there about this. So I'm excited to talk about our guest today. So who's our guest?
Our guest is, I don't know, I'm not sure if I can call our guest a crypto enthusiasm, NFT enthusiasm, innovator. Let's see what he can say about himself and how he, let's say, could label himself. So our guest is Kyd Song. Kyd Song is an amazing guy with who I had the chance to work in the past. Kyd, why I'm actually telling about you? Introduce yourself.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much for having me. So my name is Kyd Song. I'm based in Japan. I'm the APAC Delivery Center Director from OSF Digital. As Oleg said, we used to work very closely together, and it's such an honor to be here. I've been a fan of the community. I've been listening to the past podcast a lot, and I know we had someone from the company actually recently did a podcast, right? So yeah, very good to be here, and very excited to to talk about some of the very exciting topics around cryptocurrencies, NFTs, and Metaverse, and how it comes to the context of how it's going to come into the context of commerce, right? But just a disclaimer for the audience, I'm not an expert. I'm still kind of learning as we speak because it's moving so fast, and there's incredible amount of new information out there that is very overwhelming, right? So what I'm trying to do is to develop this framework in my head that allows me to take into account all the things that's happening without being an expert in all of them. I want to be an expert in some of them. I'm in Discord, I'm in Telegram, but so it's kind of my approach, right? And it's just impossible to be an expert on everything, and anybody who tries will just die of overwork. So
This is great. I feel I heard somewhere just yesterday, there was another podcast about same Metaverse, and the lady over there was telling that we cannot be experts over here. It just started like last year. How you can be expert? It's like in those job position where someone asking, oh, I'm looking for crypto developer with 20 years of experience. 20 years ago, there was no cryptocurrencies. How you want to find developers with 20 years of experience? The same is here, like NFTs. They're pretty new. So I'm with you, Kyd, that no one can be a real expert right now. And it's a journey, right? It's a learning journey. But at the same time, what is NFTs like? This is like, you can hear this buzzword everywhere. Like, what in fact are NFTs? What is your call on that one?
Yeah, great question. So, before we jump into that, the NFTs and, the discussion later about all this hype, I do want to kind of, set the context that, this is the fastest adoption of any technology in recorded history, right? So, back in 1997, when the internet was invented, right, it has 150 million users, and it was growing at a 65% a year. And now, in today's world, we have 150 million users in crypto, and it's growing at 113% a year, right? So I think this is why it's so hard for all of us to catch up, because it's growing at a ridiculous pace, and it's only accelerating. We've seen the last year, or since since 2020, the rise of DeFi, NFTs, DAOs, central bank digital currencies, stable coins, in a way that, none of us could have expected. And it just happens so fast at such scale. and that's only going to continue. So, obviously, before we kind of jump into commerce and, and more details, right? Like how I look at it, right? To frame it simply, this is currently $2 trillion asset class. And if you compare this to other asset class, they are expecting, $150 trillion and $300 trillion to $300 trillion until you get to, some of the bigger ones. So we have never seen, right, like in a human history, that an asset class is not a single stock, not a token, but an entire asset class is expected to go up 100 times by the end of the decade. That's where I think this is going, right? So yeah, it's very exciting, right? And I think, if you look back to let's say when a cryptocurrency start coming into the picture, right, back in around the financial crisis, leading up to 2020, right? Crypto was really more finance driven, more tech driven. And apart from payments, it was never really a space for brands to really participate in the space, But towards the start of 2020 is when we came across the concept of all this NFTs and social tokens, and then this is, I think, then the light bulb kind of goes off and say, oh my God, this crypto and Web3 and blockchain is about to, have its cultural moment, and, by default, it's the brand moment. And I think that's why we're going to see a lot of opportunities, in the context of commerce, right? So, does it kind of help to set the, the overall background for what we're going to talk about today about NFTs?
This is cool. You actually reminded me that you are so right. My friends, like, let's say, I consider myself IT geek, right? And my friends, other IT geeks, back in those Bitcoin first, when they were like, the price was $100 or like even less, they could use the Bitcoins to buy a bunch of pizzas. Now imagine the price of Bitcoin today, right? And it was actually like not something, no one actually considered it as a currency, some like an asset. It was just, oh, this is a cool technology. I invested, like I did some stuff over there, and now I can actually use it to buy a pizza. So that was very niche stuff where, like, as you said, right, it was technology driven, and now it's maybe much like can be used in the much bigger scale. But what is then this bigger scales? Like, how, I don't know, how business can use those NFTs or in general, like this Web 3.0? What are the use cases then in this case?
Yeah, good question. So I think there are a few use cases I think I can think of immediately, right? So as I mentioned earlier, it doesn't just stop at financial securities anymore. For instance, intellectual property and licensing can definitely, be leveraged with this technology by a lot of brands, because there's tons of efficiencies to be had by, tokenizing those types of contracts on chain, making it easy to find the provenance of those who owns the IP and how to license it, and not to have to go through all the middlemen that exist today. So that extends to all types of contents as well. You see the boom last year that a lot of projects already, creating NFTs that also provides utility value, right? Things like access to events, concerts, tickets, on a piece of music, etc. Right? So, one of the newest trend that we've also seen is, the whole concept of, NFT avatars, that where everyone wants their social profile to be representative of themselves. All right. So, it's very interesting. I was actually at an event recently in Tokyo, and there was this 19-year-old guy, super smart, and he actually created this Instagram-like platform that people can upload their NFTs and show off their collection. And he got a really big investment. He's only 19, so this is a very, very exciting space that we're in right now.
Hey, Kyd, I had a question for you. So a lot of conversations I have with people about an NFT is that there's just a misconception on like what an NFT actually is. A lot of people would say that like, oh, that's just digital artwork, or people. I know Twitter's currently doing avatars where people can like have custom avatars if they're using a different program. So NFT actually has a meaning, and so I was kind of curious if you could get into a bit of a background on like actually defining what an NFT is, and then maybe why that's not necessarily a digital asset. I think that might be helpful for some people.
Yeah, sure. So, just simplify things, right? So NFT, first of all, stands for non-fungible token. So they are, the textbook terminology is that they are the units of data that represent a unique digital asset, right? Stored and verified on blockchain. So, back to your question, the differences between NFT and digital asset, I think, is the uniqueness and the ownership, right? They are not really mutually exclusive. So 6 months ago, right? Let's say if you ask most people, they'll just tell you it's crypto art. But since then, I think it has evolved, and we know it's more than that. So if I have to explain it in a simple way, it's this new type of file format, similar to how if you would transfer a photo of yourself, or send a document over email, like you are sending it as a JPEG or PDF, but blockchain have their own digital native files, and NFT just a digital native file for blockchain network. And that can be anything from art, collectible, carbon credit, or anything, any type of financial product that needs to be unique, right? And so coming back to what I think NFT on a broad level, it's a trend of tokenizing all type of assets and putting them on blockchain, right? I think one of the example I mentioned earlier to Oleg's question is intellectual property, or things like real estate, right? And new type of assets that exist from blockchain themselves. So in a nutshell, tokenizing asset, I think, is what NFTs are all about. It's not the cryptocurrency themselves. And so this is kind of how I see it.
Well, there's actually a really good metaphor someone gave me once when I first started learning about why, it uses artwork as an example, but it's describing why, like, just right-clicking on a digital asset and saying, oh, now I have this NFT too, like whatever, isn't actually a thing. The difference is what they said as a metaphor is that it's the difference between owning the Mona Lisa and taking a picture of it at the Louvre. Like you can go and you see it, you can do whatever you want. There's different artwork you can get of it. There's all sorts of, but there's only one that exists in the world, and there's a place for it. And so that intrinsic value of having the ownership of the original is something that's it's significantly more like financially, I guess, also a thing than it is just saying I can have this other format of the same thing. And like that, being able to identify the uniqueness of something is important. So that the concept of NFTs is more about the uniqueness and ownership of that uniqueness, regardless of whether it's like artwork or whatever that's associated with it. It's literally anything can be associated with a unique tokenization that we've got. Oh, like you're shaking your head over there.
No, I'm not. I mean, like, it's just interesting to hear all of this, because back in time when I just heard about NFTs, I didn't think about Mona Lisa use case, right? I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing allegory, like about having the picture of the Mona Lisa and just on the phone, and actually owning this art, right? Like it's in the museum. It's the same as, I don't know, it's with NFTs, you cannot just copy paste something on the digital, something online, some picture, and put it and just share and say it's yours, right? You can always validate it with the blockchain. You can always validate if you are actually the owner of this particular digital asset. And even in the past, who would think about digital assets? Everyone like, oh, I cannot touch it. It doesn't exist, right? While right now, everything changes. Right now, you don't need actually to touch it to say if it exists or not. This new technology allows the new use cases and new experiences for everyone. So with that, Kyd, I have a question. How then you would see retailers using this technology? How they can apply it on their day-to-day basis? Can they actually leverage from this in some way? Maybe, I don't know, maybe some brands already doing that.
Yeah. Very good question. So, I think again, I don't know if I mentioned this. I think, this broader concept of community engagement, right? So I think what NFT does is that it allows people to kind of really come together and form a community around it. So how retailer can really leverage this is that really they can tap into this kind of collective, let's call it a creativity of your fans, your customer base, and the communities you build, your audience, something that I think is going to expand the market for a lot of these creative works, right? Whether it's art, whether it's music, whether it's content creation, what have you. And I think that's where these markets are going to go. If you have the IP built into some of these assets, well, then you can kind of push that out to your community, right? Have that be community-owned IP in a sense. If you look at content creation, maybe somebody has a newsletter, or maybe somebody else in your community has a podcast like this, and maybe somebody is a great videographer. They can actually start to create content, and it's user-generated content for the brands to kind of elevate them and elevate the platform and promote the products and services. So by buying into this kind of NFTs or social tokens, by having a piece of ownership in the community itself, it adds that, I think, extra layer of incentive, for people to go above and beyond to really, really contribute to the success and growing the awareness of their favorite brands. So I think that's where retailer can really take advantage, right? To better engage with the community and kind of, create this, a network of, really, a network of people that can really, contribute a lot of value to help them, build even better brands, for some of these retailers,
So speaking of community, there's a concept of Metaverse, which, Meta, Facebook brand renaming, all that good stuff, where, this whole idea that you can actually have a virtual community, digital community that runs off of this as a concept. Curious if you can describe what you think the Metaverse is, and then maybe your thoughts on it. And we have a couple more questions about the Metaverse for you after that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, it's interesting you mentioned about Facebook. I know Facebook is making a lot of noise about the Metaverse, but I don't think it's the true Metaverse, because the true Metaverse, I think, it requires have real ownership in your assets. And if you think about the history of Facebook, it became big because they told everyone that they could build on its platform in an open manner until it becomes so big that they say, okay, you know what? Actually, we'll make money by just shutting down the borders and essentially, controlling the space, right? So, So looking into this space from a big picture perspective, I think, it will help to easy to conceptualize it, to think of it as an end state. And again, none of us actually know how it's going to evolve into where it's going, right? It's this digitally fluid world where the physical and the digital worlds kind of where you can move around, live, exist, or work, earn, etc. But if you conceptualize the metaverse as an end state or the start of an end state, it allows you to hold all these thoughts in your head, right? Something like a digital financial system, DeFi, a digital system of organism and corporations, DAOs, right? Social tokens, system of money for the communities that you are in, NFTs, right? Digital identifiers and store of value within the digital world, and interoperability and transferability of that value across various digital properties. So all of that becomes the metaverse, in my opinion.
So if I understood you correctly, not soon I will become the chosen one from Matrix, right? Like we will not be there everywhere digitally. There will be no AI who will take over the world, because it's not like fully virtual world where we'll just move, from this physical biological world and we'll be just in those machines. It's not that, right? It's just another scale of capability that we can provide for the businesses, other stuff. So people, don't worry, we still have a chance to survive. Jokes aside, I have a question about the metaverse as well. Okay, it's clear with your comments and like your explanations how we can actually use NFTs in the business. I honestly, personally, I am amazed with the use cases. What about metaverse then in this case? Like any chances the business somehow can use it, or maybe it will impact them? Does anyone from the business side who listen to our podcast has to be worried and they have to make some actions to prepare for it? What is your call? Like, what is your call on the possible impact on the businesses in this case?
Yeah, good question. So I think it's definitely going to unlock a lot of value and help, because the community elements I mentioned earlier, right? So it's going to, probably have, again, it's just my prediction, right? It's going to probably help the brands, probably going to create new products and services, to kind of to be part of the metaverse. So, for example, I talked about NFTs earlier. I think in metaverse, you're gonna have a bunch of NFTs together. For example, I can have a piece of NFT art, or let's say a piece of clothing that I bought from a famous brand, and I can kind of show that in my living room. I mean, it doesn't maybe exist in the physical world, but if I want to show it to a friend, I can do that. So maybe those products gonna kind of become become popular, right? And people's gonna start creating those type of products. So it's kind of like Pokemon Go as a world where these digital and physical things kind of coexist, and we can have different type of experiences. I think that's definitely going to be something that the brands or a lot of businesses have to think about, right? For example, if you come visit me, I can leave you a digital map of my house, because they're visiting Tokyo, and I say, hey, it's only available to you, and you can put on some sort of glasses, and you've been given kind of permission because you got a token, and you look at it and you'll be able to kind of come here. So I think it's going to create entirely a new experiences, for the consumer, and the brands definitely have to kind of think about how they can participate, in this space going forward.
So let's say tomorrow it's virtually tomorrow. Tomorrow I go to IKEA website and I look for some furniture, and it's not only a physical furniture, but it can be also like a metaverse furniture, and I can just have a sofa and don't have anything else, but then I can buy those virtual stuff and I can just swap them, right? There is no, let's say, supply chain issues, because I don't need to wait for 1 month for something to be delivered or drive over there, pick up, because everything is digital, right? If I buy it, I already own it. It's already shipped. In the second I click the place order. So the use cases are great. At the same time, I'm honestly, personally, a bit nervous, because it reminds me of one of the Black Mirror series. I think it was there when they also had a wall with digital assets, other stuff. I will not deep dive over there. It just, like, we are humans, we try to think about positive and negative side of the technology that we are using, right? But what is your call on this shopping online experiences? Like, I don't know, it's hit my mind with IKEA. Are there other use cases, for example, even for the Commerce Cloud space? Should now developers upskill themselves with what is Metaverse, all those entities, and they have to implement something, or it will not impact us, at least this year?
Yeah, great question. So, how I look at it is, I mean, this space is still, very new. We're still kind of in the, experimental phase. So I don't think we'll get there anytime fast, but we're definitely, going to see a lot of brands and businesses, start to kind of, take part into this movement, right? So what I can think of is something that maybe, the example I mentioned earlier, they will kind of they'll have the both piece of a product. For example, they will sell some NFTs, to like some limited NFTs to the consumer. Then they will also kind of give them a physical product that comes along with it, right? And we see actually some of the brands already doing that last year. Dolce & Gabbana, they sold their first collection of NFTs for, $5 million plus last year, right? And I think we're going to see a lot of brands start to do more of that, right? And to kind of give the consumer, give their community, give their customer base a different type of experience, with this new technology. Like how it will evolve into, like, we don't really know, but it's definitely really exciting, to see how they come up with different use cases, by leveraging this new technology.
So speaking of evolving, it seems that in order for businesses to use this as a platform, they also need to evolve. So there's this concept I've been seeing about digital headquarters, that basically the companies are moving away from, my understanding of it anyway, is that they're moving away from physical buildings and they're already starting to become more remote. But then this whole concept of being able to use the metaverse and things like that, I'm curious to hear your thoughts on what a digital headquarters is and then kind of where you see that going in the future.
Yeah. Good question. So, personally, right, and for OSF, we've been working remote as far as I can remember since the first day I joined the company. So for me, this physical headquarters already kind of fuzzy for me. So we don't, really have like an office where we go all the time. We only go because we choose to, and maybe just to kind of meet face to face and interact with our colleagues, right? So I think, especially with, COVID happened, we definitely already, we already saw the trend of a lot of business moving towards that direction. So back to your question about digital quarters, I think, and of course in the context of metaverse, I think, in the beginning we're going to start to see a lot of this new, application, like building different types of workflows and apps that kind of mimic the physical experience, right? Like using Slack as the example, right? You have, the new feature of huddles, where kind of mimicking the, the traditional kind of spontaneous and informal conversation by the coffee machine. So, we can already start seeing a lot of companies and a lot of businesses doing this, kind of adopting this new trend, this new behaviors of how we're going to work together, right? So metaverse is going to be another level. You're going to be able to do all types of different stuff, right? Apart, not just working, but you can also live. You can, you can also earn money. So you can, work in different styles. You already see a lot of companies are doing that. For example, for gamings, you have, those play to earn mechanism where you have an NFT, you can earn passive incomes, right? And so that's, I think, where we're heading towards.
I actually saw a really interesting, it was a response to somebody who was talking about the metaverse, and they were saying that, I can't remember what company it was, but they did a demo on, I think it was Twitter, where they went through and showed their metaverse. And it was really fascinating because they had the ability to have like private conversations where like they had like little circle shapes that were underneath an umbrella, and if you're within that space, no one within outside of that space can hear you. You can go to a counter that was set up for HR and then ask a question, and it would they explained it that it would ping someone within their HR department, and then it would magically just show up in the thing. And so they were actually having what seemed like a face-to-face conversation, but obviously it was with avatars. But it was all happening in real time. So there's people all over the world, and then you can also just walk around and interact with other employees and do whatever you want, and still have the ability to have private conversations. So at first I was kind of like, that seems like a game, but actually there was already games that were kind of similar like to this, as far as like that started a long time ago, like Second Life kind of things. But this being a workforce, it seemed like it was a really cool concept, because it was like a digital headquarters where literally like you were bringing your employees to a place. There was a whole world set up for them. They can interact with each other, but they can also interact with the business, and it still solves some of the business problems. So seeing that already come out now, like that their company's fully using it, it's been out like this year, to me it seemed like a pretty exciting concept for like larger corporations that are already remote, that have employees all over the world. So yeah, Oleg, did you have look like you're getting ready to say something?
I just, like, when Kyd said about like chat about the coffee machine with the huddle, I don't know, when Slack introduced huddle, I was like, what? Like, I can do a Zoom call, like a Google Meet call, like other calls. Like, why need this huddle? Like, they also had the feature of the call, right? The real call, you just call and do the stuff. I honestly, I didn't understand the value of it. Then last year, moved here to Sydney, lockdown, few months is just at home, you cannot go out, right? And sometimes you want to communicate, you want to speak with your team. And going to the calendar, waiting, setting up the schedule, the meetings, it's like those more formal conversations, right? They don't always work out. And I personally, I had the cases where you just like, too, not lazy, but you're tired of typing all the time. You just want quickly to explain something. And then I started to use huddle. I was like, let's huddle. Like, and then you go and chit chat a bit, few minutes, like 2-3 minutes, 1 minute, just quickly clarify some stuff, and that's it, and you're off. And what I love over there, like, there are no videos, right? So if you're sitting in some t-shirts, relaxed, like, you don't have to prepare yourself, make up before the video call, because you'll have to share your face. You like really in very relaxed way can have very comfortable conversation with someone. That's like this allegory with the coffee chit chat. I love it, and it's exactly how I see the digital, kind of those digital headquarters theme impacting the way how we work and communicate together. Even imagine 3 of us guys right now, we are in this conversation, the podcast. I'm sitting in Australia, Kyd in Japan, and Peter, you in US. Like, before that, who would even imagine, right? I mean, that it could be so easy just to, hey guys, let's do a podcast, come to the same platform, do this conversation, and that's it, right? It's all impacted over there. So we talked about NFTs, we talked about Metaverse, but I also heard that those terms called Web 1.0, Web 2.0, Web 3.0, and not everyone actually knows what it is. So Peter, I think we had a very good discussion last time, and you were kind of talking about the difference. Maybe before we will actually ask Kyd, maybe you can bring a light a bit. What's your call on those different 1, 2, 3, 0 near the web?
Well, so yeah, just like a quick history lesson for the nerd, the other graybeards that are not listening that already know this stuff. But yeah, so Web 1.0. I think when it was written, and again, I'm not an expert either, but this is just my takeaway and generalization of it. So Web 1.0 could be fairly summarized as being the concept of having everyone had a computer. So I think the original thought was going to be that if you wanted to partake in the internet, then or intranet back then, like you had your own computer. Your computer was the server. If you wanted to interact with another person, that person also had to have a computer, and everyone that shared information was literally accessing each other's machines. Web 2.0 comes along to try to solve a problem. So Web 1.0 would be considered decentralized because everybody back then had to have their own equipment and had to have their own stuff, and there wasn't one thing that kind of ruled everything. Web 2.0 comes along to solve a pretty real problem, which was that not everybody wanted to have a server in their house, or needed to have a server in their house, or even needed to, like set up a bunch of computers, or needed to have IP addresses and DNSs and all the rest of this stuff. So what came out of that was like a centralized platforms, like the DigitalOceans and AWSs of the world, or whatever, that can actually spin up servers and websites for people, and then everyone else can join those. And then that became kind of the Web 2.0, and then that was more of like a centralized process because there were businesses built on top of having networks and things like that. So not every single person had to have one. Web 3.0 seems to be going back to the roots of, in my mind anyway, the Web 1.0, where there is a decentralized nature to it. And it seems, and this is where I'd be interested to hear Kyd's thoughts on this, but it seems to me that this is the Web 3 is going to be kind of similar to Web 1.0, but it's going to be more of building an infrastructure on ownership and these concepts of digital assets, and then building a foundation and an infrastructure on that kind of a platform. So correct me, Kyd, what did I get wrong?
No, you're right, I think, on a conceptual level, but I think like how I think about it is it's more about the situation, the brand, like how people are using it, right? So let's say if you're a brand and you've spent the last decade in, let's say, Web 2.0 and social and building your brand, you've essentially accept the handcuffs of this big tech companies like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and this big intermediaries that you basically renting the communication, right? Why it all started with roses and to build online communities, that's not how it turned out. So as you can imagine, it's very frustrating, right? Not being able to own your content, own your brand, and build a true relationship with your customers, right? So I think for me, Web 3.0 is about data ownership in a sense. And what happens is that right now, most of us don't really appreciate what digital data ownership really means, because like for my generation as well, right? Like we've been trained that only physical ownership matters. Yet if we actually lose access to our digital lives today in a way that you're no longer able to living a fulfilling life, right? Because we are so connected digitally. And so, for me, back to some of the topics we discussed earlier, like NFTs and, digital ownership is so crucial, because in a way, you could kind of own your first property that you want to defend and protect, like home ownership. If you own a piece of property, then you care that piece of property is truly yours, and you care about whether it's a freehold or a leasehold, and you care about whether there's a government that will ensure that your property rights are respected, right? So you can pass to your children or whoever you want to pass it to. So I think, for me, right back to my initial point, Web 3.0 is about this it's about this data ownership, right? And I mean, I can extend, I can maybe talk more about it. Like, on the brand side, the question, the biggest question will probably how they can leverage the technology in line with the business strategy. So, like, I think there's a lot of people certainly love to dive into the technology itself, but it's more of those questions about what does actually unlock something that wasn't unlocked before. And so really, like if you think about in that perspective, it helps you to kind of, understand this transition much better, right? Instead of just kind of looking at in a how to say, like in a just focus on the technology itself.
So this kind of naturally brings up some concerns that I know you and I talked to Kyd and Oleg before the show, and I think before even then about some of the concerns are for this is just off the top of my head, like this whole concept of Web 1.0 being kind of decentralized, or not kind of, it was decentralized, to 2.0 being more centralized, this 3.0 being decentralized but for more ownership and things like that, that the next natural transition to that might be more centralized platforms that help people get onto, like the Web 3. So like the Web 4.0, if you will be a bunch of companies like Facebooks and whatever of the future that then make platforms to make it easier to do this stuff that you could not easily do on Web 3 because of just, like adoption issues that might be there. So that was some of the questions I had for to go over with you on some of that stuff. Was that do you have any thoughts on that for already? Like the next, what happens after Web 3.0? Are there any concerns with like limitations with what we've currently got? It's probably the first question I have, and then I've got a few more for you after that.
So I guess in the context of privacy and security, obviously this is a very new space. So I think what I mentioned earlier is that we're still kind of in the experimental phase rather than the mass rollout phase. So, we don't actually know what's going to be built until it happens, right? So, but like, I think, just by like how I look at it is, because the network is so strong, you have, the people that are financial experts, that are, very smart engineers, that are, mathematicians, they are all in this together. How I look at this, eventually they'll figure it out, right? And in terms of privacy and securities, well, we sold our privacy to Google and Facebook 15 years ago, and we're never going to get it back anyway. So, it's not like it's going to be a huge concern. And, we still, live normally today. There's not a lot of, of course, there are people talking about it, complain about it, but, it's not such a big concern that, that would kind of prevent the mass adoption of people using it, right? And some of the shortcoming, obviously, they're still there. The assets on blockchain needs to be freely and openly composable, and that means you not only have the true ownership, but third parties can adapt and modify and compose, and on top of these assets to create some powerful things. Which means we have to have an incentive built in, right? That's where you hear me earlier about the tokenized community, where people are incentivized to kind of contribute to build because they have a stake in a community with this new technology, and that's what it enables. So I really think we're definitely going to have to improve some of the areas today, because it's still kind of a little fuzzy, between, some of the decentralization and centralization elements. So, in the future, when everything is becoming more of a digital asset, whether it's our investment, our artwork, or the intellectual property, things that we have money from, our digital identity, which is, all kind of, right, or going to kind of NFTs, but we haven't. I think we really have to figure out how to really navigate around this world. The UI UX elements are definitely still kind of far behind where we are today, right? For example, like even though there are a lot of people using it, like if I tell my mom, hey, I have this NFT, I want to send it to you, she'll have no idea where to start. So there's definitely a lot of, the user experience part of it definitely need to be improved for the mass market to start using it.
It reminds me on the move of the microservices architecture for those small technologies, right? We had everywhere were monoliths, right? And they started the move to actually slice it in the smaller pieces, give more independence to the people. And the move also of the open source as well, right? Like everyone were owning the code, not sharing. Now it's running with open source. And in the beginning, people also did the mistakes. So it's a learning curve everywhere. The same like with NFTs, Metaverse, digital headquarters. We are human beings. With every innovation, there is always a room for the mistakes. What actually matters that we understand that we will learn, that we will make it better, and we will move on. I love all the discussion that we had today. I really appreciated, Kyd, that you could bring more light in terms of Web 3.0, about impact for the business, different use cases. I also much appreciate for Peter history lesson, because I love that one. I knew I wanted Peter to bring into this podcast because we had a chit chat before, and like Peter was explaining me this, and I had no clue about the difference between 1.10, 2.0, and 3.0. I didn't know about this. So I'm happy we discussed that. And often in our podcast, Kyd, we have in the end part message to the community, where our guests have a chance to share their thoughts, or I don't know, whatever you want to say. So this is your message to the community.
Yeah, sure. I think, back to, you just kind of summarize the topic we discussed today around NFT, around Metaverse, around Web3. I mean, this space is much bigger than anybody can possibly imagine. We can spend all our time imagining where this is going, but, every time we turn over a different rock, we go, oh my God, that's going to change too, and that's going to change too. So, so I think it's really important for us to really understand it. We don't really know how this is going to shape out. But it's definitely, for me, I think it's important to kind of just have some awareness and be part of it, and try to see how you can add value, when this becomes more developed, right? And that's first. And second is, OSF, we're trying to do a lot of innovative things. I'm not saying we're building any NFTs or Metaverse right now, but we're definitely in the forefront of, innovation. If anything exciting, if there's an opportunity to kind of, help the brands to improve their, their businesses in terms of commerce, we're definitely going to be there first. So that being said, we're expanding really fast. And if you, if you're interested and you want to kind of talk about, how you can be involved, feel free to reach out to me, especially if you're in APAC. So. And thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure to talk about some of the stuff we discussed today.
Thank you, Kyd. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, our dear listener, and see you next time.